The Voice of America has maintained a presence at the White House for decades, and at the moment, Dan Robinson is VOA's chief White House correspondent.
Well, we found Dan in one of his usual places, the White House briefing room. In a setting you will probably recognize, Dan told us about the Obama administration's upcoming foreign policy challenges and the briefing room itself. Let's check it out. Dan, what are President Obama's top foreign policy priorities going into his second term?
Well, he's going to have a lot of challenges. As you know, the Arab Spring, the situation in Syria is going to be right at the top of the agenda. And he's going to have to build a relationship with the new president of China, Xi Jinping. In terms of the whole relationship with the Asia-Pacific region, that has been a priority for him during the first term. The so-called pivot or shift of priorities in terms of security and economic priorities to that region.
Now, speaking of the Middle East, you mentioned Syria. How likely is it that we're going to see more U.S. involvement in the conflict there?
Well, you've got, by estimates lately, 60,000 people who have died there, according to the United Nations. So this is clearly a major issue for the United States and for its partners. How that will play out in coming weeks and months remains to be seen. The president has made it clear to date that there will be no American U.S. boots on the ground, so to speak, to deal with the situation. So most likely we'll see it kind of play out, and we'll have to respond to what happens on the ground. But the question is how the U.S. and its allies deal with that situation going forward.
And then moving on to Iran, what can we expect to see out of the president's approach to Iran in this second term?
Well, as you know, President Obama has said that, the United States cannot allow Iran to develop a nuclear weapon. This has been a long-standing position. The question really now is what happens in coming months in the latest talks between the P5+1 group with Iran on its nuclear program, whether that results in some kind of a diplomatic solution. He has said and indicated that there would be an openness to direct talks with Iran. But so far, we've been unable to discern the extent to which progress has been made toward that kind of a goal.
The Israeli-Palestinian conflict was another issue related to the Middle East that featured high in the president's first term. Will we see more work on that in this next term?
Yeah, well, that's been a major disappointment. I mean, President Obama has acknowledged this of his first term, the inability to get Israelis and Palestinians together for a two-state solution. And it's been complicated by Palestinian moves for recognition at the United Nations. This has bedeviled every U.S. administration, and there's been progress, not progress, for certain presidents over the decades. We're not yet clear how he will pursue this in a second term, but we're sure to see how, what steps they might be willing to take in coming months. As you know, the president has not visited Israel. That's a sore point for many people in Israel. The question, I think, is, whether he'll make a visit to the region, a visit to Israel, and whether he'll engage more personally in this kind of negotiation.
Well, let's talk about this Asia pivot that you mentioned. Asia was the first continent that the president visited after he was reelected. What's the significance of that?
Well, the significance is that there's a link between the efforts President Obama has been making for economic recovery in this country and his foreign policy agenda, which is that American jobs depend on the fastest growing area of the world, which is the Asia Pacific. And so, he's made this link on trips. He made it last year when he went to the region. He made it again when he was in the area in Southeast Asia this year. So he's basically saying this is an area of importance, critical importance for the United States in terms of security, but also in terms of economic growth.
Another big item that's been on his agenda is the wars and wrapping up these wars.
The United States and NATO partners are on course for a 2014 withdrawal of combat forces from Afghanistan. The president has made a point in numerous speeches over the past 4 years in his first term of saying that it's time for this country to focus on reconstruction at home. U.S. troops, along with NATO allies, are supposed to be out by the end of 2014. 2013, this year, there's supposed to be a gradual phased reduction. And so, you know, he's committed to this course. The question is how many U.S. troops might remain in Afghanistan as part of this enduring partnership that they're building.
And I also wanted to ask you, I think a lot of our viewers would be interested to know, what is it like to be a White House correspondent?
Well, that's our seat right over there. I know your camera guys are going to get that shot.
Yes.
But the fourth row, second chair from the left is the VOA seat, which we've had as an organization for many, many years. And we sit there almost every single day and have the chance to ask questions of the press secretaries here. We try to ask questions of the president as well. It's an exciting, intense beat here in Washington, both in that little space downstairs in our VOA space and up here. You're constantly moving back and forth at the stakeout location out here in front of the West Wing. You constantly have to pay attention to events that are going on and suddenly happening and respond to those.
And our thanks to VOA Chief White House Correspondent Dan Robinson, who, as we said, has spent quite a bit of time there in the White House briefing room.